Marcus Bennett never imagined that the longest 10 minutes of his life would begin with his son's laughter. It was just after 6:30 p.m. on a warm Friday evening when Marcus pulled his dark blue Chevrolet Tahoe onto Highway 17. His wife, Danielle, sat in the passenger seat, while their two children, 10-year-old Jaden and 7-year-old Ava, were arguing in the back over whose soccer team had played better that weekend. Marcus smiled. "Both of you scored today," he said, glancing at them through the rearview mirror. "I'd call that a pretty good day." Jaden grinned proudly. "I almost had a hat trick." "You almost did," Danielle laughed. The atmosphere inside the SUV was light, relaxed. The family had spent the afternoon at Jaden's youth soccer tournament before stopping for burgers on the way home. It had been one of those ordinary evenings people rarely remember, until something turns them into the worst day of their lives. Less than half a mile behind them, Officer Ryan Cole had just started the final hour of his patrol shift. 26 years old, 14 months on the force, ambitious, confident, still trying to prove himself. Ryan believed good police officers spotted danger before everyone else. His training officer had repeated that lesson so many times it had become part of his personality. Trust your instincts. Most days that advice served officers well, but instincts without patience often became assumptions, and assumptions could ruin lives. Ryan stopped at a traffic light and watched the vehicles passing through the intersection. Pickup truck, delivery van, family sedan. Then the dark blue Tahoe caught his attention. Brand new, tinted rear windows, out-of-state temporary registration. His eyes stayed on it. Something about the SUV didn't feel right. He couldn't explain why. He simply had a feeling. As the light turned green, Ryan pulled in behind the Tahoe. His onboard computer automatically scanned the temporary tag. Searching. The screen continued loading. Temporary registrations often took longer to verify. Ryan frowned. Instead of waiting for the system to finish, he grabbed his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 21. Can you run a temporary plate for me?" "Go ahead." Ryan read the number aloud. "Stand by." The dispatcher began checking the state database. Ryan followed the Tahoe at a steady distance. Inside the SUV, Marcus never noticed. He was too busy listening to Ava explain why her school deserved a longer summer vacation. Danielle laughed. "I think every kid in America agrees with you." The children burst into laughter. None of them saw the patrol car. A few moments later, Ryan glanced at his computer again. The search was still processing. He tapped the steering wheel impatiently. His instincts kept nagging at him. Something wasn't right. The SUV was expensive. The temporary tag hadn't come back yet. The driver looked calm. Too calm. Ryan convinced himself those details meant something. Without waiting for dispatch, he reached toward the overhead switch. Blue lights exploded behind the Tahoe. Marcus looked into his mirror. "Oh." Danielle turned around. "Are we getting pulled over?" "I guess so." Marcus carefully activated his turn signal, slowed down, pulled onto the shoulder, placed the SUV in park, exactly as drivers are taught to do. He turned off the engine, rolled down the driver's window, placed both hands on the steering wheel, then looked at Danielle. "I have no idea why we're being stopped." She nodded. "It's probably nothing." Neither of them sounded worried. Not yet. Officer Ryan Cole stepped out of his cruiser. One hand rested near his holster as he approached the driver's side. Marcus watched him through the mirror. The officer wasn't walking. He was marching. Fast. Purposefully. Ryan stopped beside the window. "License and registration." Marcus smiled politely. "Of course, officer." He slowly reached for his wallet. Ryan immediately raised his voice. "Don't move too fast." Marcus froze. I'm just getting my wallet. I said don't move too fast. Danielle looked at her husband. The change in the officer's tone caught both of them off guard. Marcus nodded carefully. Okay. Very slowly, he removed his wallet, handed over his license, then reached toward the center console. My registration is in here. Ryan watched every movement. His eyes never left Marcus's hands. He took the documents, looked at the driver's license. Marcus Bennett. The address matched the city. Everything appeared normal, but Ryan wasn't satisfied. He looked back at the temporary tag. Still no confirmation. His suspicion only grew stronger. Is this your vehicle? Marcus blinked. Yes. How long have you owned it? About 3 weeks. Ryan studied his face. Where'd you buy it? Thompson Chevrolet? You got paperwork? It's probably in the glove compartment. Danielle leaned forward. I can grab it if you'd like. Ryan ignored her. His attention remained fixed on Marcus. Step out of the vehicle. Marcus frowned. May I ask why? Ryan's voice became noticeably firmer. I'll ask the questions. The children stopped talking. Jaden looked out the window. Dad? Marcus forced a smile. It's okay, buddy. Then he opened the door and stepped onto the shoulder. The evening traffic rushed past only a few feet away. Ryan guided Marcus toward the rear of the SUV. Danielle watched through the side mirror. Something about the situation felt wrong. Marcus kept his hands visible. His voice remained calm. Officer, did I do something wrong? Ryan didn't answer. Instead, he asked another question. When was the last time you drove this vehicle? Marcus looked confused. I'm driving it now. Ryan wasn't amused. I'm serious. So am I. The officer took one step closer. Have you ever been arrested? Marcus hesitated. No. Ever been investigated? No. Do you have any weapons in the vehicle? No. Anything illegal? No. Ryan stared at him. Marcus held his gaze. The silence stretched. Then Ryan's radio crackled. Unit 21. The dispatcher had finally returned. Ryan glanced at the microphone for just a second, then looked back at Marcus. Instead of answering the radio, he ignored it. The dispatcher repeated the call. Unit 21, do you copy? Ryan still didn't respond, because at that moment, he had already convinced himself he knew the truth. He didn't want information anymore. He wanted confirmation. And those are two very different things. Ryan stepped forward. Turn around. Marcus frowned. What? I said turn around. Officer, I haven't. I said turn around. The children jumped at the sound of his voice. Inside the SUV, Ava grabbed her mother's arm. Mom? Danielle felt her heart racing. She reached for her phone, not to interfere, not to argue, only to record. Marcus slowly turned around. Officer, please tell me what's happening. Ryan pulled a pair of handcuffs from his duty belt. You can ask questions later. Click. The first cuff locked around Marcus's wrist. Jaden's eyes widened. Dad! Ava immediately began crying. No! Don't take my daddy! Danielle threw open the passenger door. Officer, stop! Ryan never looked at her. He tightened the second handcuff. Marcus stood silently on the side of the highway, his hands secured behind his back, his children watching everything through the windows. And just as Ryan reached for his radio again, the dispatcher's voice came back over the speaker, this time sounding unusually urgent. Unit 21, we need you to copy immediately. Unit 21, we need you to copy immediately. The dispatcher's voice echoed from Ryan Cole's shoulder radio. Ryan ignored it. His attention remained fixed on Marcus Bennett. Marcus stood handcuffed beside his own SUV, trying to stay calm despite the frightened cries coming from inside the vehicle. "Officer," Marcus said quietly, "my kids are watching this." Ryan didn't answer. Instead, he tightened his grip on Marcus's arm and guided him toward the rear of the Tahoe. Behind them, 7-year-old Ava was sobbing uncontrollably. "Mama, why are they taking Daddy?" Danielle forced herself to stay composed. She knelt beside the back seat and hugged both children. "It's okay." But her voice betrayed her. She didn't believe those words herself. She picked up her phone again. The camera was still recording. Every second, every word, every decision. Ryan finally grabbed his radio. "Go ahead." The dispatcher answered almost immediately. "Registration has been verified." Ryan waited. "The vehicle is legally registered to Marcus Bennett." Ryan's expression didn't change. The dispatcher continued. "Registered owner matches the driver's license." Another pause. "No wants, no warrants, no stolen vehicle hit. Everything comes back clear." For a moment, the world became completely silent. Ryan stared straight ahead. His mind refused to accept what he'd just heard. That wasn't possible. He had been certain, completely certain. He looked back at the SUV, then at Marcus, then at the temporary tag. Something inside him searched desperately for another explanation. There had to be one. There always was. Instead of removing the handcuffs, Ryan doubled down. "Dispatch, go ahead. Run him again." The dispatcher hesitated. "Unit 21, the information has already been confirmed. Run it again." Inside the SUV, Danielle could hear every word through the open window. She looked at Marcus. Marcus simply shook his head slightly. He already understood. The officer wasn't looking for facts anymore. He was looking for a reason to justify what he'd already done. 5 minutes later, another patrol SUV pulled onto the shoulder. Sergeant Michael Harris stepped out. 22 years with the department. Calm, experienced. The kind of officer younger patrolmen usually respected. The moment he approached, he noticed two things immediately. A handcuffed father, two terrified children crying inside the vehicle. His eyes narrowed. "What do we have?" Ryan answered confidently. "Possible stolen vehicle." Harris glanced toward Marcus. "Confirmed?" "Not yet." The sergeant frowned. "What do you mean, not yet?" Ryan pointed toward the Tahoe. "Temporary registration." Harris looked back at him. "And dispatch?" "They think it belongs to him." "They think?" Ryan nodded. "I'm having them verify it again." Harris stared at him for several seconds, then quietly reached for his own radio. "Dispatch, this is Sergeant Harris." "Go ahead, Sergeant." "Read me the registration." Without hesitation, dispatch repeated the results. Registered owner Marcus Bennett. Purchased 23 days ago. Vehicle financed through First National Credit Union. Registration valid. No warrants. No criminal flags. No investigative alerts. Everything perfectly legal. Harris lowered the radio, then slowly looked at Ryan. "Take the cuffs off." Ryan hesitated. "Sergeant, I still think—" "I didn't ask what you think." The older officer's voice remained calm. "I gave you an order." Ryan swallowed. "But take the cuffs off." For several seconds, nobody moved. Traffic continued rushing past. Ava was still crying. Jaden sat frozen in the back seat. Danielle kept recording. Finally, Ryan reached for the handcuffs. Click. The first bracelet opened. Click. Then the second. Marcus slowly rubbed his wrists, but didn't say anything. He could see Ryan avoiding eye contact. The officer seemed unable to look at him now. Harris stepped closer. "Mr. Bennett." Marcus looked up. "I'm very sorry." Marcus nodded politely. "I appreciate that, Sergeant." Then he glanced toward his children. "My family won't forget today." Those words hit harder than any accusation. Harris looked inside the SUV. Jaden refused to look at any of the officers. Ava buried her face against her mother's shoulder. The sergeant sighed quietly. He had seen fear before, but seeing it in children because of one of his own officers, that was different. Danielle stepped out of the vehicle. She still held her phone. Ryan noticed the camera immediately. "You've been recording?" She looked him directly in the eyes. "From the moment you handcuffed my husband." Ryan's stomach tightened. The realization hit him instantly. Everything, every command, every accusation, every second, recorded. Then Harris spoke. "Were you wearing your body camera?" Ryan instinctively touched his chest. The small camera was flashing, recording. His face lost what little color remained. Harris didn't need another answer. He already knew. The entire stop existed from beginning to end, not only on Danielle's phone, but from Ryan's own body camera. Back at the patrol vehicle, Harris requested the footage remotely. Within minutes, the first clips began uploading to the department's secure server. The sergeant watched only the opening minutes. He didn't need to see more. He watched Ryan approach the SUV. He watched Marcus calmly hand over his documents. He watched Ryan interrupt him repeatedly. Then he watched something that made his jaw tighten. Ryan telling dispatch he had a possible stolen vehicle, before dispatch had even completed the registration check. Harris paused the video, closed the laptop, then walked back toward Ryan. "When this shift ends," Ryan looked up hopefully, "you're reporting directly to Internal Affairs." Ryan's heartbeat accelerated. "Sergeant, I'm not finished." Harris kept his voice low enough that the Bennett family couldn't hear. "Until this investigation is complete." He held out his hand. "I need your badge." Ryan stared at him. "What? Department policy?" "You've got to be kidding." "I'm not." The young officer looked around. Other officers stood nearby. Nobody spoke. Nobody defended him. Slowly, almost mechanically, Ryan removed the silver badge from his uniform. He placed it into Harris's hand. The weight of that moment was heavier than he expected. For the first time since leaving the academy, he wasn't acting like a police officer anymore. He was the subject of an investigation. Marcus opened the driver's door. Before getting inside, he looked at Sergeant Harris one last time. "I know most officers aren't like this." Harris nodded. "I know." Marcus glanced toward Ryan. "But one bad decision is enough to change a child's view forever." Then he climbed into the Tahoe. The engine started. Danielle reached across and squeezed his hand. Neither of them spoke. There was nothing left to say. As the SUV slowly pulled back onto the highway, Jaden looked through the rear window. The patrol cars became smaller and smaller. Finally, he asked the question every parent fears. "Dad?" Marcus looked at him in the mirror. "Yeah, buddy?" "Are police officers supposed to scare people?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. He thought carefully, then quietly replied, "No. They're supposed to protect them." Behind them, Sergeant Harris stood silently on the shoulder, watching the Bennett family disappear down the highway. Then he looked toward Ryan Cole. "Tomorrow morning," he said, "you're going to watch every second of your body camera footage." Ryan frowned. "Why?" Harris looked him straight in the eyes. because it's going to become the most important evidence in your entire career. The next morning, Officer Ryan Cole walked into police headquarters without his badge. For the first time since graduating from the academy, he had to identify himself at the front desk instead of simply walking through the employee entrance. The security officer looked up. "Morning, Ryan." Ryan forced a smile. "Morning." The guard noticed the missing badge clipped to his uniform. His expression changed. "Internal affairs?" Ryan nodded once. The guard didn't ask another question. He didn't need to. Everyone knew what it meant when an officer reported to internal affairs first thing in the morning. At 8 a.m., Ryan entered interview room 3. Waiting inside were Sergeant Michael Harris, Captain Lisa Monroe, and 2 investigators from internal affairs. A television screen covered one wall. A laptop sat on the table. Ryan recognized it immediately. His body camera footage. Captain Monroe spoke first. "Sit down." Ryan obeyed. Nobody offered him coffee. Nobody made small talk. One investigator pressed play. The traffic stop appeared on the screen. Ryan watched himself pull behind Marcus Bennett's SUV. He watched himself activate the emergency lights. Then the video continued. His own voice filled the room. "License and registration." Everything seemed normal for about 30 seconds. Then the investigators began pausing the footage, again and again. "And here," one investigator said, freezing the image, "Mr. Bennett informs you he's reaching for his wallet." Ryan nodded. "I remember." "You still warned him not to move too fast." "I was being cautious." The investigator clicked the remote. The video continued. Another pause. "This is where dispatch tells you they're checking the registration." Ryan remained silent. Another pause. "This," the screen froze again, "is where you report a possible stolen vehicle." The investigator looked directly at Ryan. "Before dispatch had given you any information." Ryan swallowed. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Then Captain Monroe finally asked the question. "Why?" Ryan searched for an answer. "It just didn't feel right." Silence. The captain leaned back. "So you handcuffed a man because of a feeling?" Ryan lowered his eyes. Hearing the words out loud made them sound even worse. The footage continued. Marcus answering every question politely. Marcus keeping his hands visible. Marcus never raising his voice. Marcus never resisting. Then came the moment that changed everything. Dispatch's voice filled the speakers. "The vehicle is legally registered to Marcus Bennett." The room remained quiet. Ryan watched himself ignore the information, then request another records check anyway. One investigator paused the video. "You had confirmation?" Ryan didn't answer. "You knew the vehicle belonged to him?" Still no answer. "And yet you kept him in handcuffs?" Ryan closed his eyes. There wasn't a single explanation that sounded reasonable anymore. Then the investigators switched to another recording. Danielle Bennett's phone. The angle was different, much closer to the children. The room filled with Ava's crying. "Daddy!" Then Jaden's voice. "Why are they arresting Dad?" Captain Monroe looked away from the screen for a moment. Even after 26 years in law enforcement, hearing children cry never became easier. Ryan couldn't watch anymore. He stared at the table. The little girl's voice echoed through the room. "Please don't take my daddy." The recording ended. Nobody spoke. Finally, Captain Monroe broke the silence. "Those children will probably remember yesterday for the rest of their lives." Ryan nodded slowly. "I know." "No." The captain shook her head. "I don't think you do." 3 weeks later. Internal Affairs completed its investigation. The findings were unanimous. Ryan had violated department policy. escalated a lawful traffic stop without reasonable evidence, ignored dispatch information, improperly used handcuffs, and failed to de-escalate when presented with facts. His termination became effective immediately. Ryan turned in his final department-issued equipment without saying a word. His locker was emptied before noon. By sunset, he was no longer a police officer. Marcus Bennett didn't celebrate. He wasn't interested in revenge. What he wanted was accountability. Several months later, his family filed a civil lawsuit against the city, not because they hated the police, because they wanted something like this to happen less often. During the hearing, Marcus wasn't asked about handcuffs first, or the traffic stop, or even the officer. Instead, the attorney asked him one simple question. What was the hardest part? Marcus looked toward his family sitting in the courtroom, then answered quietly, "My children." He paused. "I could explain the mistake to myself." Another pause. "But I couldn't explain it to them." The courtroom remained silent. They watched their father treated like a criminal. He looked toward Jaden. "My son didn't sleep through the night for weeks." Then toward Ava. "My daughter cried every time she saw flashing blue lights." Marcus lowered his head. "No amount of money changes that." Several jurors looked away. Others quietly wiped tears from their eyes. The city eventually reached a settlement with the Bennett family. Along with financial compensation, the police department announced several policy changes. Every officer would receive additional training on traffic stop procedures. Temporary registrations would require confirmation before escalating to high-risk tactics, unless there was independent evidence of a crime. Supervisors would review all handcuff incidents involving compliant drivers. Captain Monroe addressed reporters outside headquarters. "Our responsibility is not only to enforce the law," she paused. "It's to earn the public's trust every single day." She didn't mention Ryan Cole by name. She didn't need to. Everyone knew who she meant. Almost a year after the traffic stop, Marcus drove down the same stretch of Highway 17. The Tahoe was no longer new. The temporary tag had long since been replaced by permanent plates. Jaden sat in the front passenger seat now. Ava sat quietly in the back reading a book. As they approached the same shoulder where everything had happened, Marcus noticed a patrol car parked in the distance. For a brief moment, the SUV became completely quiet. Ava looked up from her book. "Dad?" Marcus glanced into the mirror. "Yeah? Is everything okay?" Marcus smiled gently. "Yeah." The patrol car remained parked. The officer inside never looked up, never activated his lights, never moved. Marcus continued driving. After a few moments, Jaden looked out the window and asked, "Not every police officer is like that, right?" Marcus thought carefully before answering. "No." He kept his eyes on the road. "Most officers are good people." He smiled faintly. "And the good ones are the reason the bad ones get held accountable." Jaden nodded. Outside, the patrol car disappeared in the rearview mirror. The highway stretched ahead. The fear that had once filled that road no longer controlled the family. Some memories never disappear, but they don't have to define the future. And sometimes, justice isn't about punishing one bad decision. It's about making sure the next family never has to live through it. The end.